me just set up testing. Testing. We haven't even titled this place yet. I don't know what to call it, so there's no official name, but we'll get there. PHSDS stage is what it is. Welcome. So last week, if you were at Propagation House, Spatial Design Hub, you watched us work on an XR design stream for about 5 hours, and that was one long session. What we did was go from scratch to finished interoperable soundstage, event stage, keynote stage, whatever, any kind of stage you want to call it. But for us, it's a virtual production stage. The point of this was to bring about a really important discussion, and that is that where virtual production is headed, we see a lot of emphasis and a lot of focus on really expensive physical blends for these massive LED screens that bend around you and can do anything you want. And those have their place. Those exist for a reason. They're totally badass. I love them myself. But there's a really overlooked opportunity with fully virtual production sets, and where we build spaces for social settings and utilitarian settings like workshops and classes and streams and all that. There's also the side of maybe there's no one around, but you need to film a video and get a concept out, and you need somewhere to do that. If we start looking at virtual assets and virtual environments as multi-purpose assets, production sets, things that we can use to actually generate meaningful media and convey our ideas in a way that's articulate and fits physically with an architecture that conveys the context of, our brand or your brand or anyone's real purpose and the kind of information that they're offering, a lot of magic can happen. And you don't need millions and millions and millions of dollars to do that. You need one computer, just one. So where before you had to buy all of the camera hardware, all of the lenses, hope to God the weather was going to work with you that day, get the permits, fly out the people, do the logistics and all of the planning, all of these exorbitant costs that really build up when you're trying to do something at scale. These are things that you can create with a digital native audience in digital space. And you can iterate very quickly, you can film very quickly, and you can go back and get all of the shots you need. On top of that, you can place the same asset on multiple platforms for multiple purposes. These are things that we have to begin thinking about, or we should begin thinking about, and a lot of these digital brands of the future are really going to have to become cultural lifestyle association brands. And what that means is we're figuring out how to pour into everyday situations in our lives. How do we do that? Well, you have to provide safe spaces, you have to provide utilitarian spaces, and you have to provide programming that makes people want to come back. Provide programming that is interesting and actually offers a benefit to its users at an endpoint that puts them in a position of self-empowerment and self-actualization. And those are all things that we can actually do here. We just have to do it thoughtfully and with a little bit of strategy. I really also just want to drive home the accessibility aspect of this. Again, as someone who spent 7-8 years doing photography, doing film, I know how much ramen you have to eat or how much food you have to not eat at a starting point to get all the tools you need to convey your ideas. And I still absolutely love natural spaces. And if you look at our designs, there's an organic element to almost all of them if we have full creative control. But you can't always get there. Can't always afford the equipment, and sometimes you can get there, get the equipment, and something goes wrong. Something breaks, the weather doesn't work the way it needs to work. And all of that cost becomes a risk. Just trying to do it becomes a risk. And where I still support it, I still encourage it, we're still going to provide space to host and spotlight people that work in the natural world, and we'll still bring aspects of the natural world in really detailed, intimate ways into virtual spaces ourselves, because I think there's a whole conversation on that. Right? Even if you're an environmental brand or an outdoor recreation brand, this does fit your ethos, especially if you're trying to design ideas and concepts at scale, host events, and so on. You don't have to always be there. And sometimes you can bridge that gap in a way that provides awareness to both, and it's very, very, very powerful. Virtual assets and virtual spaces are not just for public events. You can leverage them completely outside of that. And I know we just did a general scope, but it's just a kind of follow-up closing reminder that the opportunities that exist within virtual space and the assets that you use there only really end at your imagination and your own ability to leverage them, if that makes sense, right? And so anyone can use these spaces for any number of purposes, and I think it just needs to be said a million times that these spaces are for everybody, and if they use them, their whole life can change very quickly, especially when you plug in and tap into a global audience, a global platform, or multiple platforms. But that's all talk for later. Right now, let's just focus on the power of virtual production, and we'll start kind of pushing that conversation a little bit further from inside spaces like this. Is why we built it, but we also built it for you guys. So if you want access to this, let me know, and we will figure that out in its own way. Oh, another huge thing we should totally discuss is the iterative capacity. I know I mentioned that in a word, mentioned briefly a moment ago, but the ability to templatize these sets as things that you can reuse, repurpose, retexture, rebrand, modify, customize, redo the interior design, all of the things you might want to do with a space that would cost you a lot of money, and again, a lot of time and resources. Now you just need a single server, single computer, single space. And again, if you are already working in digital and you're at this point in the times, I guess it's 2023 right now, or almost in the next year, you've already recognized that you're kind of forced to understand a lot of different languages and a lot of different formats of file types if you're going to succeed here. But if you can do that and fit that into a pipeline and just recognize where to put these in each slot, your assets are going to become exponentially more valuable. Think about the fact that a photograph could cost $50,000, $60,000 years ago, still can today, for an advertising campaign. It's a photograph. From a photograph, you can get a 3D asset now. But if you can make custom assets, or you can provide custom spaces, the IP on that is a lot more. If a picture's worth 1,000 words, what is a whole reality worth? I don't want to get too stuck on monetization either. This is just a huge opportunity for people who want to create in a way that fits their context, especially if they're in digital space, and can give them a lot of